Hello, everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast synopsis as part of a research summit. This audio podcast series as part of a Bravado assembly. This audio podcast as part of an underreported world remit, and this audio podcast as part of a ZtormLabostix production. In this audio podcast, series, there will be a look at several chapters where several chapters are looking at where there will be a sort of a basis looking at literature across six varying chapters, and where in the chapters there will be where there amongst the six different chapters or varying chapters there'll be a sort of an exploration or an investigation in around literature across these different sort of themes, these themes. And the basis of this one of the bases is to invite discussion across social media, social media and sort of ZtormLabostix production, social media, and the literature works, the peer reviewed works across these varying chapters of these different themes. There's different themes in around aspects of healthcare and healthcare practices, etc. that have been at least historically or traditionally not so sort of public domain, and so the idea is part of this remit, or this research remit, this sort of Bravado assembly sort of audio podcast series will be to invite discussions around these varying themes, thus to bring out those important aspects of healthcare, thus to see that there is a general more awareness of these important topics. So for example, to begin with, one of the first chapters as part of this audio podcast series, as part of this research remit, as part of this Bravado assembly, and this audio podcast as part of an underreported remit. There will be a look at intercollaborative working and healthcare workforce, and looking at literature around importance of collaborative working, understanding importance of integrated workforce, understanding healthcare through professional differences, looking at importance of healthcare ethics and fairness for all. And then chapter two will be looking at bridging real issues in healthcare and applying protocol in excellence, and sort of looking at compassion in healthcare, and then looking at ensuring healthcare inclusivity, looking at diversity in healthcare and knowing healthcare, and then looking at race and evaluation in context of particular practices in around nephrology care. And then in chapter 3 there'll be a look at striving for international unity across healthcare, and sort of looking at healthcare and the war you don't see, looking at literature around healthcare. And let's be sort of upfront about it. So literature that delves into those topics that have been published, or have been published and to some extent are known, but again are not sort of public domain. And then looking at literature around pediatrics and young people suffering with particular illnesses and diseases. So there'll be in chapter 3 there'll be a look at healthcare in context of pediatrics and young people, And then there will be literature looking at sort of works where there have been some documented works documented works in healthcare from a sort of young people from young people perspective. And then there'll be an interlude. There'll be an interlude as part of this series, and then chapter four. Chapter four will be looking at bringing together compassion through healthcare, and sort of looking at literature around healthcare professional practices, looking at sort of nephrology aspects around transplant and transplantation attitudes, and then looking at knowing the challenges, and then looking at kidney care for all, or nephrology practice, or nephrology care for all. And then chapter 5 will look at literature in around physical activity and combating end stage renal disease, or ESRD. And then looking at literature around keeping health and well-being sort of core practice. And then there'll be literature in the series, in this chapter, looking at an exploration of chronic kidney disease, and sort of where those who suffer with chronic kidney disease, or CKD, where those suffering with CKD, and where those suffering with CKD, and looking at sort of the nutritional aspects, that can cause some of those who suffer with CKDs sort of varying challenges. And then looking at physical activity for persons transitioning to renal replacement therapy, and looking at those who transition into from for example, going from looking at sort of one particular modality, sort of renal replacement sort of modality, to looking at those who are looking at the sort of the modalities in across sort of those who suffer with forms of CKD. And then look at in chapter 6, in chapter 6, and the literature around chapter 6 will be around bringing together peace and humanity, and looking at literature around healthcare through peace and humanity, looking at patient-centric care, through sort of BAME perspective, and looking at literature around understanding security and well-being in healthcare, and then looking at being aware of healthcare and surroundings. So that draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast synopsis as part of a research summit. This audio podcast as part of a Bravado assembly. This audio podcast as part of an underreported world remit. And this audio podcast synopsis as part of a ZtormLabostix production. As per usual, there will be a sharing of the literature across ZtormLabostix production, thus to invite sort of discussions around the varying literature and the varying chapters in a prompt to see sort of a more awareness around those important and pertinent sort of topics, of the topics that are not normally public domain. So again, the literature will be shared, so thus to prompt and invite sort of hopefully meaningful important discussions, thus to see a more awareness of these important sort of published works. So thank you for tuning in on this synopsis, and to finish off, it's time to put some light on this beast.